started with laughter, the kind that makes headlines. Colin Jost, live on SNL, looked straight into the camera and let it fly. Part of Trump's UK deal is we send Meghan Markle back, but only if she deletes her Instagram again. The audience roared. But beneath the punchline was something sharper. It wasn't just a dig. It was a reminder that the internet never forgets, and more importantly, it never forgives. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as Meghan was busy launching new lifestyle ventures and stepping back into the spotlight with curated interviews and brand deals, a ghost from the past came clawing its way out of the digital grave. A single image, old but potent, resurfaced online, a woman lounging on a yacht in the Mediterranean, surrounded by wealthy men, champagne flowing, sunglasses on, and access written all over it. The woman? Unconfirmed, but to many, unmistakable. It looked exactly like Meghan during her pre-royalty days, and suddenly people weren't laughing with her, they were laughing at her. That photo wasn't scandalous in isolation. No one was doing anything illegal, but the context, that's what stirred up the storm. The timestamp, the people in the background, the quiet deletions over the years, it didn't feel random. It felt like a puzzle piece that had been forcefully yanked out long ago, only to fall right back into place when people least expected it. And once that photo hit the feeds, the conversations exploded. Reddit threads ignited like wildfire, Twitter timelines filled with side-by-sides, guest list screenshots, and archived social posts. People weren't just speculating anymore, they were investigating. Not journalists, not gossip sites, regular people, laptop warriors with nothing but facial recognition tools and too much free time. And what they found wasn't some grand smoking gun, it was a pattern. A pattern of vanished accounts, forgotten friends, missing images, and oddly timed rebrands. That's when the narrative shifted. The story of Meghan Markle wasn't just being told, it was being re-examined. Because this wasn't just about a yacht photo, this was about the way that photo contradicted the carefully packaged story. Meghan the underdog, the humanitarian, the outsider who stormed the palace gates and rewrote the rules. But now there were receipts, and those receipts whispered a different tale, one of strategy, calculation, and possibly a past she hoped no one would ever connect the dots on. And while the internet went into overdrive, Meghan stayed quiet. No tweet, no statement, no softly lit Instagram story with a vague quote about growth, just silence. And silence in this case spoke louder than any denial ever could. Because Meghan's history with the media is no secret. She's sued tabloids, she's clapped back, she's demanded corrections and launched full legal campaigns over misleading narratives. But this time, nothing. People noticed, and they didn't like it. Even diehard fans began to waver, not because of the photo itself, but because of the gap it revealed between the image and the reality. It wasn't about whether she was ever on that yacht, it was about the fact that for someone who claims transparency and authenticity, her silence now looked less like grace and more like control. It created a crack in her story, and once that crack appeared, everything else started to feel a little shaky too. The rebrand, the speeches, the polished interviews. Was it all just PR? Or worse, was it all premeditated? That SNL joke didn't just get laughs, it flipped a switch. It gave people permission to question what they were seeing, and more importantly, what they weren't. Because the problem wasn't that Meghan had a past. Everyone does. The problem was that it seemed like she was trying to erase it. When someone disappears from old photos, it doesn't go unnoticed. Especially not in an age where screenshots are forever. People began pulling receipts, digging up archives of red carpet events, obscure blog posts, party footage, and buried Instagram tags. Stylists, influencers, and minor celebrities who once posed alongside Meghan started to vanish from the internet's memory. Entire accounts wiped, old interviews clipped short, blurry group shots edited. It was subtle, but it was everywhere. And it raised a question that turned from curiosity into suspicion. Why erase so much if there's nothing to hide? Then came the whispers, not from tabloids, but from people who used to know her. Background actors, makeup artists, boutique owners. No direct accusations, just odd little fragments. Mentions of NDA. Friends who suddenly stopped speaking. A shift in demeanor once Meghan began gaining traction beyond suits. It wasn't malicious gossip, it was quiet distancing. the kind that happens when people get the sense that silence has become part of someone else's business model. Forums started piecing together a rough map. Early connections with high-profile names, sudden jumps in social circles, a fast climb through industries where access was everything. Meghan didn't just move up, she moved smart, and that's not a crime. But in the court of public opinion, strategy starts looking shady when paired with erasure. People want authenticity, not a perfect origin story polished to the point of fiction. More attention turned to the yacht photo, not because of what it showed, but because of who else was in it. Several faces were blurred out or unidentifiable. But one in particular drew attention. A man with a known reputation, quietly tied to Prince Andrew through multiple events from that era. It wasn't proof, it wasn't even solid, but it was enough to reignite old conspiracy theories and push them into mainstream chatter. The photo became the symbol, but the narrative stretched far beyond it. Suddenly, Meghan's journey wasn't being celebrated as a fairy tale, it was being scrutinized as a chess game. Each move reinterpreted. Was the royal marriage truly fate, or a masterclass in knowing the right people at the right time? Was her exit from the family really about freedom, or was it the final step in a long-term plan to control the narrative from outside the palace walls? Even mainstream outlets, ones that once defended her against every media attack, began softening their tone. Headlines started using phrases like curated persona, unanswered questions, and strategic partnerships. The shift was slow, but unmistakable. This wasn't about hate, this was about doubt. And once doubt creeps into public trust, everything else starts to wobble. Colin Jost's joke had landed like a warning shot, but what came next was a flood. Other comedians jumped in. Late-night hosts made sly references. Reaction videos, breakdowns, and TikTok explainers started pulling millions of views, each one rehashing the same core issue. What happens when someone who built their brand on truth suddenly won't speak? Behind the scenes, Meghan's team was reportedly scrambling. SEO firms were allegedly burying old links. Positive PR stories were being sprinkled across lifestyle outlets. Bloggers were being approached for sponsored content. But it all felt reactive, like trying to plug a dam that had already cracked open. And through it all, Meghan stayed quiet. Not a single post, not a single interview. And in an age where silence often reads like guilt, that stillness began to feel heavy. Her defenders argued that she owed no one an explanation, but even they began to admit it was getting harder to hold the line. Because when a public figure disappears from their own history, the internet doesn't fill the gap with kindness. It fills it with questions. Somewhere in the middle of all the noise, the tone shifted from curiosity to frustration. People weren't just asking who Meghan used to be, they were demanding to know why no one was allowed to ask in the first place. Every deleted tag, every edited caption, every former friend gone silent started to feel like pieces of a larger, intentional effort, not a coincidence, a campaign. And when the narrative feels manipulated, people instinctively pull back. Comment sections once filled with admiration turned skeptical. Supporters were met with replies linking old footage, timelines, event guest lists that somehow no longer matched public records. Even those who weren't paying much attention before found themselves dragged into the drama. It wasn't about one woman on a yacht anymore. It had become about the larger machine behind her image. The more polished her public moves became, the more hollow they seemed. Her lifestyle blog relaunch was supposed to be a triumphant return. Instead, it was met with mocking headlines and comment threads filled with side-by-side comparisons of then versus now. Speeches about kindness were clipped and reposted with sarcastic overlays. Even her philanthropic work began to be questioned, not for its value, but for its timing. Was it genuine outreach or preemptive damage control? The problem wasn't that people thought Meghan had a dark past, it was that they felt lied to. People resonate with transformation. They celebrate growth, but they resent being sold a story that erases what came before, especially when that story is wrapped in royalty, media power, and privilege. acknowledge. Authenticity isn't about having a perfect record, it's about owning the imperfections. And then, without warning, new allegations started surfacing. Whispers that former colleagues had been pressured into silence, claims of contracts rewritten, payouts offered, and NDAs that went beyond the norm. Again, no hard proof. But in the world of public opinion, patterns matter more than documents. And the pattern was looking rough. Some reporters hinted at bigger stories being buried, pieces that had been pitched to major outlets and mysteriously killed before publication. Former insiders teased vague anecdotes, walking the line between curiosity and lawsuit territory. And while nothing concrete dropped, the tension was unmistakable. People were waiting, refreshing, watching for that one undeniable leak to finally tip the scale. The real shift came when the silence stopped feeling like professionalism and started feeling like evasion. Her past didn't need to be scandalous to be damaging, it just had to feel carefully hidden. The mystery wasn't in the content, it was in the cover-up. And in a culture obsessed with transparency, that alone was enough to spark backlash. Late-night segments that once joked playfully began to cut deeper. Podcasts dove into her entire timeline, episode after episode, dissecting every relationship, every career move, every media pivot. Fans turned critics began comparing her story arc to textbook branding strategies. The phrases engineered rise, controlled narrative, and long game became common refrains, and Meghan still said nothing. The silence had once been elegant, now it felt ominous. The final blow didn't come from a leaked file or a disgruntled ex-friend. It came from perception, from the slow, grinding realization among everyday people that maybe, just maybe, the woman who spoke about finding her voice had actually mastered the art of staying silent when it mattered most. Trust, once cracked, doesn't bounce back, not easily. Meghan had spent years building an image of strength, resilience, and authenticity, but in trying to manage her story too tightly, she created the one thing no PR team can spin: doubt. And in the eyes of the public, doubt spreads fast. Because once people feel like they've been sold a version of someone instead of the truth, they stop buying altogether.